to asset management. And as an entertainment lawyer, my work surpasses intellectual property law. So intellectual property law is just like one aspect of what I do. So what I do mostly is that I work for entertainers to make sure that all their assets are actually making them money. So I work to ensure that they don't put themselves in certain scenarios that will cause them to lose money or lose goodwill and other things that have monetary value attached to them. So to start, please can you change the slide? What are assets? Next slide, please. Yeah. So what are assets? I described it here as useful or valuable items or property owned by a person or corporate entity that can be traded to satisfy needs or for the acquisition of other assets. Now, before I explain that, I'll just read out the second definition by the International Financial Reporting Standards. It says that an asset is a resource controlled by the enterprise as a result of past events and from which future economic benefits are expected to flow to the enterprise. So now, the first definition is trying to explain that, okay, an asset is anything that has value attached to it. And you know that the best way of calculating value is with money. So whatever you see as an asset should be able to be translated into money. It should be able to have like a price. I think that's the best way, a price attached to it. However, depending on the location, depending on the economy, the prices attached to certain things usually differ. But what qualifies as an asset is the fact that it actually has money that can be put as a price tag on it. Then the second part of the definition says they can either be owned by a person or a corporate entity, meaning that a company can own assets. Then the last part is the fact that it can be traded. So something is not an asset until you can exchange it for something else or exchange it preferably for money. But there's an important thing that the second definition explains and highlights. It says that it's a resource controlled by the enterprise. It's a result of past events. And what it means is that an asset is something that is created by either a person or a corporation. Basically, something that is created as a result of past events and from which future economic benefits are expected to flow. So if you have something that and is decreasing, the value is decreasing, then that should tell you that it's a very bad asset. So I think that should give us an idea of what exactly an asset is. Then the next slide is the classification of assets. There are different kinds of assets, and they are classified into three major ways, but I'll just stick to their physical existence for now. So now assets are some of assets are classified according to compatibility, physical existence, and how you use them. But I'll just focus on physical existence for now. And physical existence means whether it is tangible or intangible, whether it's something you can hold on to or you can see with your physical eyes, or whether it's just something that you perceive that it exists, but you don't necessarily see it. For instance, music. So now music is like an intangible asset and is classified under intellectual property. Next slide, please. So now, tangible and intangible assets, these four I highlighted are the ones that we are most familiar with. Actually, they're basically everything, but for the sake of business owners, these are the most important ones. Under tangible assets, we have chattel, we have real estate property. Then intangible assets, we have securities and intellectual property. Now, the ones that we are most familiar with is chattel and real estate, and probably maybe one or two intellectual properties. But I'll be starting with chattel, which is the most common one. Next slide, please. So here I describe the chattel as any physical and movable item that a person or corporate entity can possess. They are often described as our personal belongings or goods. Basically, they are like physical things that you can feel, you can touch, you can move about. And economics can describe some of them as liabilities and some of them as assets. But for the sake of understanding the fact that they can be traded, we are going to call them assets today. Then the next is real estate property. Real estate property is what we all call land. So basically, it's not just my definition here explains that real estate property is not just the land itself, but everything under it and everything on top of it. So the airspace, the minerals in the ground, everything is part of it. If you have like a factory that has equipment that are permanently hinged to the ground, like that are permanently put in the ground, then that equipment is also part of the land. So if you buy that land, you're buying everything attached to it. Then the next is securities. Securities are valuable financial instruments and investments that can be traded. Now you have the equities, you have debts. Now equities are basically, it's just these two can be loosely explained as assets and liabilities. Very loosely explained that way. What I mean is that the debts are basically what debts is. They are like loans that you are owing. So basically, debentures that a debenture is like it's like a very fancy name for a loan that somebody will give a company, basically. Then company shares, I believe that we all understand it. They are like the ownership rights in a company, rights to the profit, rights to vote, right to make decisions, basically ownership rights in a company's profits and the rest. There are stock options, mutual funds. So these are different kinds of securities, but they are also referred to as assets. So for instance, recently in a game company in the US, there was an issue of people shorting stocks where they were basically, should I say like, how do I put it? Okay, they were like spreading rumors about fact that people shouldn't buy stocks because the stocks were bad or that stuff like that. But a lot of people ended up buying a lot. Then the value of the stock like shot up very high, and in that, so basically, you know what? Let me just go on because it's going to be a very long explanation. Let me just move on because of time. Then the next type is intellectual property. That's the next kind of asset. Intellectual property are assets created by the mind. They are original ideas that have been put in a fixed form. So this kind of ideas, I believe almost any average person must have come up with like an intellectual property or not, or at one point in time. The only difference is some may be valid and some may not be very valid. What I mean by valid is originality. So it's possible that you must have come up with a story, a song, a poem or anything, but it's also possible, it's most likely that somebody already created it before you. So now what makes it intellectual property is the fact that you were the first person to come up with it, number one. And secondly, that you put in a fixed form. So even if you have an idea that nobody has ever had before, but it's still in your head, then it does not yet become intellectual property. Now, what I mean by still in your head is that, for instance, if it's music, right? If you've written down the lyrics already, that has been in a fixed form. It does not have to be like physical words that you can hold because that's impossible, right? So it's intellectual property in the sense that it's not tangible, but at the same time, it has to be in a form that somebody can share. Now, it doesn't have to be physical in the sense of moving from one place to another, but it should be, let me put in a way, it should be virtually fixed. Then I gave examples here: scientific inventions, literary works, artistic works, musical works, sound recordings, design, symbols, names, trade secrets, images, etc. Now, down to the major topic today about asset management. The first question we'll be asking is, or answering rather, is who can own assets? Now, the answer is this: a legal person can own assets. So it means what this is trying to say is that it's possible for somebody to be illegal. What I mean by illegal is it's possible for someone to not be a legal entity or qualified to be called a legal entity. Now, there are different kinds of, I highlighted like three major kinds of people: citizens, aliens, that's foreigners, and companies. So the question, we'll not be answering the questions whether these people are legal persons and whether they have the right to own assets. So the 1999 Constitution gives states like specific people that can be called citizens. But those that their parents or grandparents were born in this country around or before or on the date of our independence, those that can trace their heritage, their lineage here, people that were born here, and people that naturalize it over a long period of time. Now, the Constitution actually says that everybody can own every citizen rather can own immovable property anywhere in Nigeria. But the Land Use Act also says something very important. It says that all land in Nigeria, right, belongs to the governors, and that when a person owns the land, what is actually happening is that the governors will lease it to the person, and the lease time is actually 99 years. So that means from the moment the governor leases that land out, it starts counting 99 years. So if a land has never been given to anybody, has never been allocated to anybody before, and it's allocated this year, what happens is that the time starts counting this year. Now, what the Constitution is now saying is that every citizen has the right to own land. But the Constitution doesn't really talk about people owning property, like other kinds of property, like securities, like intellectual property and chattel. But there's a general assumption that if all citizens can have the right to own land, then we also have the right to own every other kind of property. Then next slide, please. For real estate properties. Now, the Constitution now talks about people that can own real estate property. It says every citizen, right? Then in section 42, it says that there should be no discrimination based on gender, religion, and a long list of other things. And what this is trying to tell us is that someone should not be stopped from owning property because of the person's gender, religion, association, ethnic group, things like that. But we know that in reality, a lot of communities don't allow women to inherit land. Some people even go as far as saying that they won't sell land to women that are not married. There are a lot of discriminations actually happening in real time. However, some of those laws have started getting abolished. And recently, in 2014, in a case I highlighted here, UKJ versus UKJ, the Supreme Court ruled against it, that women in a particular Igbo custom will not have the right from that time henceforth, to be able to inherit properties from their families, their fathers or their mothers. But that's just for real estate. Then for age, the Land Use Act says that the governor cannot give land, cannot allocate land to people under 21. However, when it comes to things like inheritance, a child can actually inherit land from their parents. The only issue will now be that somebody has to hold it as a trustee or guardian for them till they reach that age of maturity. Then next is securities. Who can own securities? Now, securities can be owned by anybody. The only thing is for children, like I mentioned, you have to have like a trustee to be able to represent them when it comes to things like voting, but they can actually own shares. The only thing is they cannot become directors in companies. They cannot make decisions or act as officers of a company. So now that's where business owners have to be very careful when they want to, because I know a lot of business owners now are teenagers, and there's this mad rush. I want to be my own CEO. I want to be an MD. You understand? Even though it's a one-man business, I want to be a CEO. So because of that, the first thing I want to do is establish a company. What our advice is, just calm down. You can actually run your business to a certain level, or you get someone, or you be prepared to be able to partner with somebody that is of legal age, or you just simply wait till you are of maturity before you register your business. However, you can actually go ahead. The only thing will be that you cannot be a director or MD or CEO, whatever you like to imagine in your head. At best, what you can be is a chairman of the company. That's when I say chairman, I mean like the highest shareholder. So you can actually have as much as 80% of the shares. The only difference is that you cannot sign and make you can make decisions, because in the end is what you vote for that the MD or CEO can do. The only difference is that you cannot stand out. For instance, if you want to get government contracts now, you can't present yourself as someone below 21 as the MD or CEO. So things like this should be considered. Then for chattel, that's for properties, that's personal properties and belongings, and also for intellectual property. The issue with owning them is contract. Now, under the law of contract, you are not an adult rather until you reach the age of 18. unlike the Land Use Act that says you must get to 21. Now, this one is lower. However, you cannot carry out contracts. Like, you cannot sell your intellectual property, you cannot sell your song legally if you're under 18. You cannot buy music. Basically, like all these contracts you're carrying out, right, they're all voidable when you get to court. So it's best that anytime you sign a contract to transfer property, whether like a car, that's chattel, or like intellectual property, music, designs, and the rest, whenever you're in such a situation, it's better for you to involve an adult, and that adult is going to stand as your guardian. Now, the guardian does not necessarily have to be your parents. It can be another relative, as long as the person is directly related to you. However, it's always best for it to be your parents, or maybe like an elder sibling. Then, so that's for major. But however, if it's for like smaller transactions, necessities, things like food, there's no problem under contract law. So now the issue with this thing is that you can go ahead and sign this contract. It's just that by the time they get to court, what you've done is that you have created a technical difficulty. So even if you have rights, you've already put yourself at a bad disadvantage from the get-go. So we're supposed to be conscious of all these little things when we create, like when we start businesses and we start to create properties in the process. So now you might not even have maybe like a big land. You might not have, you might not even register it as a company. It might just be a business name, or it might not even be registered at all. But you are bound to create things like intellectual property. I think that's like actually, even though the knowledge of intellectual property isn't widespread, a lot of people don't know about it, but it's actually like the most common property that people create, especially in the course of business. For instance, now your business idea alone is an intellectual property in itself. How much more the things I create? Let's say that, for instance, you are a computer programmer, right? Now, for every computer program you create, you've created a new copyright. Or let's say you are an IG influencer. For every video that you make, that's copyright. For every picture you put, your image rights are there. For your logo itself is a trademark, although you have to register that one first. So like they are in the process of doing business, we create a lot of a lot of intellectual property. So we need to be very conscious of how to protect them and how to use them if we really want to make money properly. Then for aliens, when I say aliens, sorry, the next slide. When I say aliens, I mean foreigners. Now, there are a lot of laws that govern how they can use, how they can own, they can create, they can buy or sell property in Nigeria, regardless of type of property. Excuse me. So on this slide, I listed different laws. Like now for chattel, I mentioned the fact that there are immigration laws that govern it. For securities, our Company and Allied Matters Act governs it, and actually a long list of other laws. Unfortunately, I cannot go into all these things one by one because they are like a lot. For real estate, actually, I believe that they need the permission of the governor of each state to be able to buy land and sell. And there are some states that actually allow them to even own land, as long as it's not bigger than a particular size. But either ways, if you are doing business with somebody that is not a Nigerian, and you know that property is going to pass in between you. Well, when I say property, whether IP, that's intangible property, or fiscal tangible property like land or chattel, then you have to be very conscious of actually, and to an extent, it's impossible for you to know all of them. That is where getting a lawyer is very important, because the stories that touch you now start rising up, issues of somebody cheating you and different things like that. Then companies next. Yes, a company can actually own properties as long as the company is registered. Now, there are different kinds of companies. There are business names, there are limited partnerships, there are limited liability companies, there are different kinds. But for the sake of this, I'm talking about limited liability companies. That's like private and public companies, right? They have the capacity to own properties. You can sell to them, you can get back. Now, but for business names especially, if you sell your stuff, like let's say you sell your IP, right, to a business name. What you've done is you've sold it to the owner of the business personally. And if anything should happen, you can hold that person liable. But if it's like a limited liability company, you can only hold the company liable. And if the company goes bankrupt, that's the end of your matter. You cannot go ahead and start meeting the directors or the shareholders. You get, there are a lot of gray areas in all this. So in the end, it's better to go talk to a lawyer. But the purpose of my discussion today is to make you understand the need for professionals when it comes to asset management, and for you to also be conscious of, okay, if as I'm doing business, what exactly am I creating? Am I creating a property? Who owns that property? Who is supposed to get? Am I supposed to get permission from somebody? Am I supposed to get a license? How much am I supposed to pay you in rent? Things like that. Then the next slide, what is asset management? So from everything I've said so far, I think we should be able to understand or have an idea, a very clear idea of what exactly asset management is. Yeah, I define asset management as the act of systematic development, acquisition, promotion, use, and disposal of assets. Now, let me see if I can make it simpler. Basically, asset management is the act of properly creating your assets in the first place. Then next is the act of using the asset properly in a way that it will actually make you money. And by the time it becomes a deficit or it starts to turn to a liability, knowing when to sell it, who to sell it to, and if in some certain scenarios, maybe like especially with stock and company shares, when to buy it back, who to buy it back from, who actually has the authority to sell, like especially for intellectual property. So asset management is just like everything that happens around from the creation of an asset to the moment you lose ownership, and if you are going to get ownership back again. So that's basically it. And an asset manager is a person that helps you manage it. And we know that assets is what creates wealth, right? And you know that anybody that say, when you hear of this, the Forbes list and the rest, you know what it really means is not just how much money the person has in the bank, but it's actually how much the cumulative assets that belong to the person. That's what we now refer to as wealth. So basically, an asset manager is someone that manages your wealth for you. Then the next is who should manage your assets. Now, the first thing that will come to your mind is an asset management company or a professional asset manager. Now, the tricky thing about that is that it's a very wide concept, in the sense that an asset manager is supposed to know how to manage all assets, right? That's the assumption. But the truth is that because of the unique natures of different assets, it's difficult for one person to be able to know how to manage all of them. For instance, now let's talk about gold. If as an intellectual property lawyer, it's going to be hard for me to come and explain to you the value, or to even carry gold and tell you, okay, this is how much it's worth, and this is how much you should sell it. And if you sell it in this certain market, this is how much it will get you. And whether it is possible to buy it back immediately. And things like that, it's going to be difficult. So in the end of everything, it's better to just have separate people managing your separate assets. Then you cannot have one particular person to supervise everything, to know that, okay, these persons are making the right decisions per case. And the first professional that comes to mind is a lawyer, followed by an economist. Now, economics majors, what they do is, or the idea of what I have that they do is that they understand the value of things, of assets basically, and they understand how all these things affect the economy, how to measure them and things like that. So I believe that having an economist on your team is very good. Then a lawyer helps you make the right decisions. Now, when we go further, I will explain to you what exactly a lawyer does when we talk about asset management. Now, next is asset managers. Okay, we should all have different managers for different assets. And because, for instance, as an entrepreneur, chances that you've already created all the kinds of assets. For instance, if you rent a shop, let's say you go to a particular environment and you rent a shop for like 10 years, or like you take out a lease for like 5 years, right, for your business. And you later find out that environment is not supposed to be a commercial environment. It's probably supposed to just be purely residential, and the government comes and demolishes everything. What you've done is that you put yourself in a pickle, and you have to start running around. Apart from the fact that it causes inconvenience for you and your customers or your clients, it now brings up the issue of compensation, and there might be loss of properties in the process of the market, demolition and the rest. So figuring out good what do you call it, good locations is actually a big deal. And so in that particular case, that's like your first asset, your location, your land or your shop or whatever it is. And in sense of chattel, now the things that you buy for your business to be able to, let's say that your equipment, your materials, whether the raw materials, the finished product, all those things are part of your chattel, so they are your property too. Then there's the securities. If it's a registered company, or even if it's not a registered company, even if you're just freestyling it on your own, the money that you borrow as investment is actually securities itself. The money that you probably want to invest in another business so that it can coming back into your own is also securities. So that's for someone that is like properly freestyling and is unregistered. But ideally, your securities will involve like other debentures, loan, your bonds, a lot of things, yeah. But for a complete business, let me just say like a 16-year-old entrepreneur, chances are your securities just involve your loans and your profits and everything. Then the next thing, that's basically your securities, like your cash, both the one you're expecting, the one you're owing, and the one you have with you. Then your IP, let's start from your logo. Your logo is a trademark on its own. Though if you don't register your logo, chances are you will lose it. Then your brand colors are also part of your trademark. Then let's say if you're a caterer, for instance, your recipes, those are part of your trade secrets. The pictures that you take of your food and everything, that's like copyright. Yes. That's copyright and also image rights. Then if, for instance, you created like an app or something, it's also copyright for your business. So basically, in the course of doing business, regardless of how small it is, you're going to be creating a lot of products, and that is the reason why you really need asset management. Then in the next slide, I talk about how the kind of people that manage different kinds of assets. I mentioned the fact that real estate property can be managed by real estate agents, caretakers. Those are the ones. Caretakers basically just manage developed lands. Basically, when I say developed lands, I mean for instance, like buildings that residential buildings, commercial buildings, basically some land that has the building over it that it's actually working. Then lawyers basically help you to put all your papers in check and to make sure you don't get duped. Then chattel can be managed by what I believe are economists, sometimes probably accountants, also a lawyer, very important. Then securities can be managed by stockbrokers, asset management companies. I believe there are different kinds of companies for security management, but for now, these are like the most obvious ones. Then intellectual property can be managed by royalty accountants. Though we don't have a lot of that in Nigeria, but I think I know a few personally that I work with. But it's something that if you ask around, you ask intellectual property lawyers, they can help you find. Then IP lawyers also help manage intellectual property. They'll tell you the ones that are defective. They'll tell you the ones that can bring money. And for instance, now performing arts, performance rights, let's say to a sound recording, or no, let me use like a video recording, yeah. Performance rights of video recording. Let's say you recorded yourself singing on stage, and let's say it was a Fela performance in 1950, or let's say 1970. By 2030, your copyright in that work has already expired. So imagine somebody selling it to you 2029. Meanwhile, the next year, the right in that thing has already expired and it has entered public domain. So what a lawyer will do for you is that to tell you whether these things are valid enough in the first place, so that you don't make mistakes of either buying them, stuff that the rights are already dying or out of, you get, because probably of excitement or how profitable you think it is in the market. So as important as the value of something is, you have to also understand the time limit of the protection in it. That's where lawyers come in. Then, but in the event that you cannot hire like professionals, then it's advisable that you actually get a lawyer first, because the lawyer knows all the laws regarding it. Get a lawyer first, then you can now get a numbers person, whether an economics or an accountant. So basically, those two professionals can help you hold the fort until you can get like stockbrokers or house agents or all that you get, or real estate companies. So at least those ones to take care of the books and make sure that you don't fall into deficit at any point. Then now, it's at the same time, it's possible that you might not be able to afford like a retainer for a lawyer. Then when I say retainer, I mean you cannot afford to pay a lawyer every year to help you go through your books and make sure you don't make a wrong decision. In that scenario, what our advice is that you go like before you make any business decision first, like before you make it like major decisions, just go and do a consultation with a lawyer for like just a one-off thing. For instance, now if my retainer is ₦1 million, I can take a consultation for 50,000 naira. And you, in that maybe 1 hour consultation, you ask as many questions as possible. So what you do is that before you go there, so you don't go and start rambling unnecessarily, sit down, do your research, find out all the answers that you need, like all the questions that you have about where to buy, who to buy from, when to buy, what exactly you should even buy in the first place, if you should license. Like, I have all your questions lined up, so that what you do at the interviews or the consultation is that you ask those questions, you get those answers immediately, then you can now go and implement them yourself. That's if you cannot afford a lawyer like full time. But either way, you cannot like cancel it out, because personally, most of my work as an entertainment lawyer is correcting people's mistakes, and even though it puts a lot of money in my pocket, it can get tiring after a while. Because half of the time is like, okay, I collect a job like maybe 500K, and I realize that if this person had spoken to me before going ahead with this deal, I could have just collected 50K and I would have prevented the whole thing. Now, it's annoying when I think about it from a moral aspect, but financially, for me, I'm making more money. And yes, to an extent, it sounds selfish, but so that's the truth. It's better for you. It's basically, prevention is better than cure. Cross all your T's, dot all your I's before you actually even make any purchases, or you even sell your stuff, because sometimes people sell a lot of IP, and 5 years down the line they realize, oh my god, this thing was very, like, the value of this thing was so much. Or let me give an example. You are an artist signed to a record label, you sign away all your rights to the music. Then after you've left the record label, they say you blew small, you carry money, you japa. Only for you to realize that the music that you made there, they didn't just stream it during the time that you were with them. They continue streaming it even after you left. And they have now used it in like a video game as the soundtrack. Then from video game, they have put it in a movie. From the movie, they've put it in a cartoon. They're getting a lot of millions from it. You cannot complain. You now go and start ranting on social media that they stole your masters, they cheated you, they did this. But the truth is that you didn't even understand the value of what exactly you're doing. And unfortunately, it is you that signed the rights to all those things. So the thing in that scenario is that if you had consulted a lawyer beforehand, at least you understand the value of all those things first, and you'll be able to negotiate better, because knowledge, they say, is power. Then consequences of bad asset management. That's the next slide. If you sold a gold necklace, these are just like scenarios. If you sold a gold necklace to your grandma gave you for 50,000 naira, and you found out a week later that the value was actually 90 million, how would you feel? If you sold your company shares for 5 million and a week later the value like jumps up because of the stock market to like maybe 80 million, how would you feel? If you bought a building for 150 million and a year later the government sends you the demolition letter that place is supposed to be for the railway, how would you feel? So these are questions we should ask ourselves, because these things happen. Nigerians, we have this mentality that it's not happened to me, sha. It's not happened to me, sha. Then when it not happens, you act as if maybe the whole world turned your back on you, when in reality it was you who turned your back on yourself. So we should all imagine the worst case scenarios all the time before making certain decisions, because there are some areas like I see that this place is buzzing. Or let me give an example in Abuja here. The road leading from Asokoro to, like, from Asokoro to Nyanya, I think around Maraba side, there are a lot of shopping complexes on each side, on both sides of the road, and I just heard an announcement that they are going to demolish most of those shopping complexes because they are trying to extend the road. Now, on the the state's master plan, the roads are supposed to be wider than that. But what happens in most cases that lands that are marked for other areas, what people do is that they'll go ahead and sell it, or they'll go ahead and go and buy it, build stuff there because okay, this place is buzzing. There are many other people that are selling. If you not advise them differently, they'll tell you that but other people are doing it. Now what happens is by the time they start demolition, they are not going to look at anybody's face. And sometimes the value of a building can be over 3 billion naira, and the government will pay you 30k, and there's nothing you can do about it. At most, you take them to court for like 5-8 years, and by the time you are done by the time you get to judgment, the judge can now like rule that you should be paid 10 million naira, and you've probably spent how much on the case itself. Now, what is 10 million in 3 billion naira case? So things like that, we should always think ahead instead of, yes, like now, me, I can go to court for anybody. I can go and shout, I can go and do the gra, get my appearance fee, get my litigation fee, get everything, chop money, buy a new car. But the truth is, I know that this thing could have been avoided. We just sometimes some of these things can be avoided with something as simple as a one-page contract. That is all. Or maybe as simple as making a call to Aegis, saying, please help me check for a particular land position. Let me just see the master plan. Let me see what this area is allocated to be. Is it a residential area? Is it an industrial area? Is it a commercial area? So simple questions like that. Yes, as a private citizen, you might not realize all these things, but that's where a lawyer comes in. They know the questions to ask. They know where to go for due diligence. They know what to do, when to do it, how to do it. And in the end of everything, don't see it as spending money. See it as you're protecting your assets, so you know how to spend 10 times the amount later on. Then I put in a small tidbit here. When I said, did you know that last 2 months ago, Bentley Motors can no longer use its name on clothing range anymore? Now, Bentley Motors is a very large brand. Everybody knows them. They've been here for over 20 years. And everybody will feel as if, okay, a company as big as that, and they cannot make that kind of mistake. But I have a long list of examples, but because I'm trying my best to keep this short, and I prefer to like explain intellectual property management separately. But my point here is that a lot of people make mistakes regardless of their size. And these people have access to legal advice. They have access to a lot of resources that an average person doesn't have access to. Now, if that kind of person can make this kind of ridiculous mistake, especially about their trademark, how much more can someone that doesn't even seek any advice at all? Now, in their own case, they went ahead to challenge Bentley Clothing, a company that was that was established before Bentley Motors. But in some cases, but even in everything, what happened in the end was that they lost the case. They had a lot of money awarded against them, and they still had to. Now, every clothing that they have ever created, they will have to either submit it to Bentley Clothing, or they'll have to destroy it altogether. And you can imagine how much money that is in the drain already. So as a small business person, just look at it as you're being selfish. Get this as you're creating all the assets, but I'll advise, talk to a lawyer first. A lawyer will help you, even tell you, okay, these are the assets you have. Then if you need more professional advice, they will not tell you, okay, go to this account and let them help you go through this, go through your numbers. If it's probably maybe a publicly traded company, when you are going to talk to this stockbroker, they will help you to make the right decisions, who exactly to sell this stock to, so you don't lose voting power. You understand? Things like that. Then so now the last slide says second to last slide says, what do asset managers do? They help identify and value assets. So it's only like an IP lawyer that will tell you, okay, this song, this is the value. You can use it as a soundtrack. You can use it for synchronization here. You can use it for public performance. You can use it, and this is when exactly to expire. This video, this is when the rights in it will expire. And between this time and this time, this is how much you can sell it for. And between this time and this time, okay, this kind of music is no more relevant in this period, meaning that this is you understand, things like that. That is where professionals come in. And there are sometimes you can get overexcited. Everybody's doing it, you want to do it too. Before I used to be extremely pained and I'll advise everybody I can. Now I just allow people to make mistakes. But the only thing I'll do is I'll leave like a very short advice. Go and talk to a lawyer. I won't even bother with the long story of why or why not. Just go and talk to the lawyer. If you refuse to, I know that if you make, by the time you're done making mistake, I'll earn more money. So no problem. Then the what they do, they help identify and value assets. So you know which one exactly is profitable and which one is not. Then they help maximize the use of your assets. So by the time you know which one is profitable, you'll now try and use it as much as possible. For instance, now, you can, let's say music, you can use it in short films, you can use it in big films, you can use it in games, you can use it in cartoons, you can use it in advertisements, you can use it like many things, right? To make money. So that way you're not just going to, it's not just about the shows that you get for bookings and the rest. Then they help dispose your assets at the right time. So there are sometimes that assets start to become deficits. They start to depreciate in value. Then you know, okay, maybe this is time to probably dump it. Or a stockbroker can even tell you, you know what, hold it first. At the so and so time, this thing is going to be scarce. Then you can trade it then, and for a higher cost. An example now is Bitcoin. I'm sure a lot of Bitcoin traders understand this better, or forex traders also. So basically, a professional will tell you when to sell, when to hold, when there will be scarcity and when there will be abundance. Basically, then they help you reduce your liability. So it basically will help you drop things that are going to pull you down. Then, in summary, they put more money in your pocket. And most importantly, they help you avoid stories at church, because as a lawyer, that is 90% of my work, to sit down and listen to people complain. After everything, I'll start build them. But in the end of everything, the 10% of the time when people actually come to me before they make major decisions, those are the clients me I like very well. And sometimes I even do free work for them, just because, like, at least they are removing the burden of running around and correcting mistakes that should not have been made in the first place. So basically, so that you will not come and start giving us long thread on Twitter, just talk to professionals first. So if you manage your assets poorly, whether regardless of the type of assets, you're going to lose money. Whether money you've not gotten before or money that is already in your pocket, you shall lose something. So just be careful. Thank you.